So, Victor, welcome. Um, about Victor, Victor discovered Urantia Book in 1993, has been involved in a diverse array of Urantia Foundation and community projects since the late 1990s. From 2001 to 2004, Victor served as a manager of the Spanish desk at Urantia Foundation. Born and raised in Mexico City, Victor has traveled across Latin America, personally, professionally, and on Urantia Foundation business for most of his adult life. He has spent most of his professional career in the marketing sector developing strategy and plans for marketing agencies, Fortune 500 organizations and nonprofits in the US and globally. Welcome, Victor.
Thank you very much, Antonio. And really, the only other aspect that I would like to share with the audience as we begin this time here is I've had the immense opportunity, thanks to the trustees of Urantia Foundation, to participate in the uh, production of a revised version of the Spanish text of the Urantia book. And that is a project that is taking close to 10 years, that is also not too far from being completed, and that I am delighted to be part of. And that's something that has really informed and educated me a lot, talking about education. Um, I chose education without being an educator, because I just would like to offer and then in exchange ask you to please interrupt me as many times as needed, um, to talk about what education is from our human perspective, what it is from what we discern and understand in the Urantia book, and what it is also from the vantage point of those of you who are teachers, professors, professionals in this space. And because some time ago, someone asked me a question that I did not have an answer. I'm not sure I have a good answer yet, but I feel I may have a response. So I thought, the way I thought of this was, well, I would love to understand purpose, origin, and destiny. And then when I read it again, I thought, well, that's all good, but it kind of sounds also a little bit big, too big for me. And I pictured in my mind God thinking, oh, yes, right, you're going to talk about that, as if you could. So I don't want, I guess I just want to set the right expectations. This is really just an offering, a part of a search, part of my own learning curve and education. And I will welcome your feedback at any point throughout the way. If we don't complete my slide deck, that is fine by me. I don't intend to rush too much. I won't be slow either, but I would encourage you to ask any questions that you may have. Because I'm using my screen to project, I cannot see any hands raising. But if someone can call any question, any person wanting to participate, please let me know, and I will be more than happy to stop. So, with that said, as I was just sharing with you, my intent is to talk a little bit about the origin, purpose, and what it is that we perceive, we discern from the revelation perspective, from our own life within perspectives, to then take a look a little bit to some data, some information. I would love to make this also very grounded, kind of bring it down to the human level with all the complexities and simplicities that that entails, and then maybe try to pivot and grasp some of those cosmic perspective elements, those nuggets of insights that the Urantia papers gift us. And then just really talk and exchange ideas and experiences. Um, you know, everything in my mind begins with the teacher master, the master teacher. And in this idea, I thought, okay, well, we also have a revelation. The bestowal of Michael was per se, of course, as we know, a revelation. But then we were given the word in form of, in a printed form, and that is a revelation. And then we have experience and knowledge. And today we are very painfully and unfortunately aware of how experience can be sometimes complex, difficult, tough, even mortal from the human perspective. And it comes accompanied with a lot of knowledge, know-how, and awareness that grows around this disease and around so many needs that are out there. We are more aware, I believe, than ever before about things such as inequality, lack of access to health and food and education. So in this context, what education has to do with all of this, right? Well, it has to do with everything as long as it is part of our life experience, as translated in the form of service. So it seems to me, and I want to leave you really with this picture as we go through the presentation, this image of the teacher plus the papers plus the experiences we go through, including the COVID-19 and the opportunity to be of service, in my mind, somehow amount to education. That is what education is all about. It's all of the above. It's not one thing alone. And in this part about origin and destiny, I just wanted to touch upon what we know the book discusses in terms of how we ordinarily, our minds, we try to approach things from the simple to the finite, going from those things that are closer to us to those who are farther away apparently, and not that easy to grasp, right? From human origins to divine destinies, are we told in document 19. But we are also forewarned that is not the path that leads to wisdom. History alone fails to adequately reveal future development, that is destiny. Future development is destiny. Destiny is development. Development as education, right? And finite origins are helpful, but only divine causes reveal final effects. So from the finite to the infinite, the true perspective, are we told, of any reality of problem, of any kind, cosmic or human, can be had only by the full and unprejudiced study and correlation of those phases of universe reality: origin, history, and destiny. To really understand things, we need to experience three realities. Those three realities: origin, history, and destiny. And again, it's about experience, right? So, are we told? That is the reason why. And yet some other reasons. The revelation embarks upon a process on the time-space journey from our future, the infinite, the eternal, and divine paradise source and center of all personalities and all cosmic existence. So that is a little bit the parallel that I wanted to draw here. How can we take a look at that first and then come back to where we are? I see three notes here in the chat box. I don't see the notes themselves, but again, please feel free to interrupt me and just speak, just talk. As Gard said the other day, just talk.
Hey, Victor.
Yes, Chris.
The zipper on the top of your shirt is hitting your microphone every once in a while.
Ah, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's take care of that. There you go. So I thought, I'm a little bit square-headed sometimes. Well, what is the whole goal of this thing? What is the purpose of education and learning? And I was asking this question once, a few years ago now, when I had a conversation with a very good friend of mine, an American woman. This was more than 20 years ago. She was living in Mexico, not far from where I lived. We used to work in the same place. He had lived in many other places, and she was educated, successful, professionally speaking, and spiritual. And she was always reading, an avid reader, and she was very interested in so many books, and some of them had to do with spirituality and religion, and we talked about all of the above. And one day I offered her the Urantia book. She's one of the 2 or 3 persons in my life that I have actually volunteered a book. And she said, oh, this looks interesting, but wow, it's quite a break. Do I need to read this book kind of to be saved or to have life eternal? And I said, no. Am I required to read it? Is kind of a precondition for some reason? Is there something that I would really need to be able to go to the afterlife? And I said, well, no. So she said, well, then I think I want to pass because I don't really have to read this book and it's too big. It looks like complex and complicated. And beyond what we might think about her opinion or what I might have thought back then, it really kind of put me in the path of trying to understand the purpose of learning, the purpose of education, again, as I said at the beginning, because I believe education is one of the most compelling angles that I can find personally to explain and live through, or try to live the teachings from the revelation, the life of the master, and my personal life. So I said, okay, this is interesting learning. I'm going to try to take it. And then I looked for this purpose of education, and in searching in the Urantia book, there is, I love key term search. I mentioned my background is in marketing, and some of my work has to do with digital marketing. And search is very technical, is very boring. But so something that I learned to do was to look for keywords. So in searching the text and for the term purpose, I found the following, right? The real purpose of all university education is to effect a better coordination of the isolated child of the world with the larger realities of his expanding universe. So it's about values coordination. That was one of 4 purposes that maybe there are more. I've been able to only find 4. And they go on to tell us on paper too. Truth is coherent, beauty attractive, goodness is stabilizing. And when these values of that which is real are coordinated in personality experience, the result is a high order of love, coordinated by wisdom and qualified by loyalty. Values coordination in a high order of love. Interesting. That was my first value finding. The second purpose of education had to do with develop and sharpen the mind's endowments. It is the purpose of education, are we told on paper 16, to develop and sharpen these innate endowments of the human mind, of civilization to express them, of life to realize them, of religion to ennoble them, and of our own personality to unify them. The cosmic mind unfailingly responds, that is, recognizes response on 3 levels of universe reality. That is causation, duty, worship. Apologize because I think I went a little bit too fast there. So the second purpose of education has to do with developing and sharpening our mind's endowments, as it has to do with the mathematical level of things, causation, the judicial form of this cosmic discrimination or duty, and with worship, which is the highest insight of the cosmic mind. So worship is not only a spiritual experience, right? It's through the mind, as we know, that we live and die. And it's those 3 levels, the mathematical, the judicial discrimination one, and the cosmic mind, that we need to sharpen, or rather that we do sharpen if we attain education. That is the purpose, the second purpose of education. The third one has to do with skill, selfhood, wisdom, and spiritual values. This one is kind of, to me, sounded a little bit more complex. On paper 71, we find this statement. The purpose of education should be the acquirement of skill, pursuit of wisdom, realization of selfhood, and attainment of spiritual values. Urantians should get a vision of a new and a higher cultural society. Education will jump to new levels of value with the passing of the purely profit-motivated system of economics. Education has too long been localistic, militaristic, ego-exalting, and success-seeking. It seems to me we are right here. Here is where we are today. We are still kind of trapped, stuck in this space where we struggle to move away from nationalisms, from education that is more localistic, that is centered on our own ego, our own exaltation, on what we observe humanly and mistakenly as success, right? And we need to move in the direction of worldwide idealistic self-realizing and cosmic grasping. That is what skill, selfhood, wisdom, and spiritual values entail as a third purpose, as stated by the Urantia book, right, on paper 71. Very interesting. So the fourth purpose is the attainment of this majestic and balanced personality. And this is one of my favorites. The purpose of all education should be to foster and further the supreme purpose of life. That is the development of a majestic and well-balanced personality. There is great need for teaching for the teaching of moral discipline in the place of so much self-gratification. Going back to the times we're living through, moral discipline seems to be of the essence, seems to be, of course, a huge need. But we seem to be also in a space as human race where that seems to be accelerating, right? Upon such a foundation, religion may contribute its spiritual incentive to the enlargement and enrichment of mortal life, even to the security and enhancement of life eternal. Even secular education, are we told, could help in this great spiritual renaissance if it would pay more attention to the work of teaching youth how to engage in life planning and character progression. I would like to rescue from this last slide character progression in a majestic and balanced personality. Because character, as one of the main goals, one of the main reasons to be of education, is all over the revelation. And for those who struggle, attempt, and fail every day to live the revelation, it's clear that character is a goal, that the pursuit of improving our personality in a way that is more balanced, more symmetric, to paraphrase the master, is a goal, and it's a purpose, and it's one of those four purposes of education that I wanted to present to you up to this point. So before I move to some of the human perspective aspects I want to share, are there any questions? Is there anyone would like to share? Ask me a question?
Yeah, I think John made a comment via the chat. Maybe he wants to highlight it himself. You can unmute yourself now, John. John Hales.
I know unmuting oneself is always a challenge. The icons are sometimes so small, right?
Yeah, John.
Yeah, I don't think I had my hand up, but so
All right.
great presentation, Victor.
Thank you very much, John. And great to see you as always.
Me too.
There was a John that made a comment on the chat. Maybe, I don't know if there's another person that would like to comment on that.
All right. Well, again.
Oh, it was a different John. It was not Hales. Sorry.
All right. I will continue then. Human perspective. So in this part of this presentation, I'm going to share with you some information. And really, here is where we kind of take a quick look. I won't spend too much time, and I won't read this entire definition. But of course, from the human perspective, Wikipedia talks about processes, right? Process of learning, the facilitation of learning, and the acquisition of knowledge, skills, values, and beliefs and habits. So that is, I guess, from our human perspective, that process and that facilitation, for the most part, is what education is all about. And education, we have divided, right, in the course of up to this day of our history, into stages, right? We call those stages preschool, kindergarten, primary, secondary school, and then tertiary, or college, university, and apprenticeship. The reason why I mentioned this here is because I want to share with you now some interesting data points that help me kind of try and may attempt to put into perspective where we are from the human perspective when it comes to education as a planet, as nations. And I'm using two sources. One focuses on the assessment and measurement of education amongst 15-year-olds through the PISA study, which is a program for international student assessment. It's coordinated by the OECD, and it's the most well-known international assessment of learning outcomes. As I said, it measures 15-year-olds' abilities around reading, mathematics, and science, right? And it was first carried out in '97. The latest iteration that I'm aware of that is available was published in 2018 or early 2019 with that data as of 2018. That's what I'm going to share with you right now. Important to note is when we hear in the news about education and comparisons internationally, this is one of the main sources of that information, of those headlines. And so far, it's representing 28 million 15-year-olds in 72 countries. So it's a very interesting source. I found it very, very enlightening. So this global, in this heat map, shows reading performance by region. The darker the region, you can see where reading skills are more advanced. Of course, Northern Central Europe, North America, Australia, some parts of Latin America and Asia are more advanced than, say, all the regions within South America, Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. How does that look from perspective of the mean in terms of performance of reading? What you see here is from year 2000 to year 2012, the rankings. The rankings and the progression throughout the years. I invite you to go to this website and play with information because you can mix as many countries as you want and make a selection by region. In the case of what you're going to see here, you're going to kind of take a look at the top ranking ones and then some countries in Latin America, because I've been focusing on Latin America as of late. But it's interesting to see how Finland, Japan, Germany, the UK, and the US are high up there, of course, as are some other countries in Europe, as Spain, Russia. China is notably, of course, up there when it comes to reading. And some countries in Latin America are doing not that bad, comparatively speaking, but yet not at the same levels, of course, as Northern Europe and Japan. This is the same graph, but now for mathematics. And this really has to do with mathematical reasoning, using of mathematical concepts, procedures, facts, and the ability to describe and explain and predict phenomena based on mathematics. So it's very specific. This is how do they actually use and employ mathematics. This is not about memorization. So in this measurement, what we see is that China jumps to the top, right? And nations in Asia are up there together with Finland and Germany. And this, again, to educators comes as no surprise. We know that the Finland model, the Korean model, the Russian model of teaching mathematics is very, very popular in many countries, including America. In the US is prevalent. And where I live, you can see private little shops where professors also offer after school specialized lessons to students of all ages around this topic. So we see how that's working. And then this third slide shows us science, right? And this is scientific literacy, if you like it. And it has to do with engagement and reasoning, has to do with understanding the discourse about science and technology, and being able to explain phenomena scientifically. So that is what this variable measures. And again, we have the same usual suspects on top, right? Between Japan, Finland, China, Germany, the US, Russia, Spain keeps on popping up there, notably, which is excellent. And you see where the rest of some of those Latin American countries rank. If you don't see the same number of countries compared to the previous slides, is because they no longer rank. So many Latin American countries, as is the case with many other countries and regions around the world, simply do not attain a ranking that is measurable. So that is kind of an interesting snapshot of where we are with 15-year-olds around the world. But what happens with higher education? Higher education, just for the record, so that we are all on the same page, it has to do with post-secondary education, or third level, or tertiary is called also. We know in most parts of the world it's optional and occurs after the completion of secondary education. And the rest, as we know, has to do with the realm of teaching. And in many countries, but especially in America, includes both undergraduate level and graduate levels or postgraduate levels, right? And here, the information is really coming from the same source, but the information is compounded by one world in data, that URL that you see there at the bottom, with data provided by UNESCO, the World Bank, the historical monasteries, and universities data. So we see the same heat maps here with higher education. In this case, you see that the US is now in North America stronger than Canada, comparatively speaking, with the previous map that you saw, the previous map of this type that you saw. You see Russia prominently there, and similar regions of Europe, but now more presence in some Asian regions and the Middle East. And I thought it was interesting to note, because that is where we are going when we look at our youth versus where we are today. This graph shows the gross enrollment ratio of tertiary education, the percent of enrollees regardless of age, as expressed as a percent of the total population, right? You see North America is leading with over 20 points, Europe and Central Asia. And we can see the rest of the countries, or the regions rather, ranking. So it's a very unequal distribution, right? And again, this helps explain many, many things. And as we plan our social outreaches, as we work in translating, I'm now thinking about the work I do, or the revelation, as we work in programs that are educational and secondary materials, and as we try to recruit the teachers and leaders and go about just sharing the revelation, all this, in my mind, has to be taken into consideration. If anything more, other than or because of the complexities and the differences there are in the readership or amongst readers themselves. And not long ago, a new survey was published about Urantia book readers. Others have been published in the past by different organizations. And one fact that comes to mind is most readers have not read a Urantia book in its entirety. That is just a fact. It seems from what we can gather with the tools we have today. And in part, I would argue, has to do with the realities of education, the level of language of the revelation, of course, and the complexities, not to mention other factors such as life stage and time availability. But when it comes to this advanced education...
Sorry to interrupt you, but Mark Hutchings has raised his hand, so I don't know if you would like to intervene now or later.
Please, Mark, go ahead. Yes, absolutely.
Hey, Victor, how are you?
Very good, brother. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Hey, so I just had I wanted to make two comments. So one thing that I thought was interesting also is the literacy rate. And if you look at the literacy rate from 1820 to 2020, in 1820, only 12% of the world population could read. And in 2020, only 12% of the world population can't read. So I think that's a really, really kind of stunning statistic. The other thing I wanted to sort of point out that I thought was interesting and that might inform this as well as you're sort of going through some of these facts was, so I'm listening to this book called Anti-Intellectualism in American Life by Richard Hofstadter, and it's a really good book. And toward the end of the book, he talks about intellectualism versus anti-intellectualism as it pertained to education in the 1800s and up through the mid 20th century. And there was a sort of transition from the classical curriculum. So you could sort of think of like the gentleman's education, where they got an education in Latin and things like this, to the education that you might get in an American high school today, where they're giving you this broad-based kind of practical training. They're sort of trying to train you for the workforce, but they're also trying to prep you for college on some level as well. And there was a big fight over this change in the US between 1870 and 1910. And what was known as sort of the life adjustment or the practical training version of it ended up winning out. And so there's been not just a sort of dramatic rise in literacy, but there's been a dramatic change in the way that we educate in the West in the last 20 years or 200 years. And I think it's fascinating that the revelation was placed like right in the midst of this major transition.
Those are two very good points, Mark. Thanks very much. You know, you remind me that the data on this second aspect, higher education, started to be gathered using sources such as monasteries and churches, because that's where education originated in the West, right? And there is a point early in the 20th century where education became secular, and that separation became necessary. It was of course a long coming process, but you're absolutely right. That demarcation at large in a unified region or regions has been a hallmark of Western education, and completely in agreement with you regarding literacy. I will share a couple of points in one or two slides that build in the same direction you just pointed out. Great two data points, Mark. Any other comments? All right. So this is school life expectancy, and this is the number of years that those who attend school spend at school during their lifetime. That is basically what this is. The numbers speak for themselves. Clearly, Finland continues to be leading, together with Germany, the US, Japan, up there. Information on China is not available until, is not ranking until further down in this case. So this talks to the inequalities that are encountered in different regions and different nations. That's an interesting point to mention, especially because talking about books, Mark, there is a book that I just recently read called The Souls of China, and discusses a number of things. It's a brick as well, but discusses education and religion and power in China. And for those interested in the East and spirituality and religion from the perspective of Pulitzer Prize winner who has lived for a long time in China, it sheds light on culture and education and facts. So, human perspective.
Doreen has a question.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Oh, yes, thank you, Victor.
Thank you.
I just have a statement rather than, well, it could be a question. You know, there are many ways to teach and there are many ways to learn. And over the years, I've met many teachers, and especially the stories they would relate to me is that in the poorer neighborhoods with drug addicted families that don't feed their children, they go send them to school, they can't think because they haven't eaten and they even haven't slept. And some of the parents get arrested and the children are left behind. And it's really, really, you know, you can't just put people into a category and say, this is what you're learning. So I'll move on to say that one of the teachers said, to teach these children mathematics, she took them out on the street, she gave them carts, they picked up all the bottles that were worth 2 cents or a nickel, they gathered together, they figured out how much money they made each day as far as mathematics concerned, and they learned math that way, the actuality of doing something. When schools bring children to actualize what it is they're trying to teach, you know, it's like in Harvard, I remember the professor threw a ball and he's teaching another language and he threw it to each classmate and then he threw something else and they all interacted that, so they got what the translation was. But this is the repetitive way instead of just looking at a book and trying to memorize what it said, it doesn't repercuss inside of you. And for myself, I see in the book, it says the dry sands of knowledge. Okay, so I read all this. How does it change my life? So I have to go inside myself and meditate on what I read so that it processes not just from the mind, but into my heart and soul to actualize what is it they're trying to say and what do I do with it? So it's not just, I know in the United States, they try to just like, I think it was Mark said, they prepare you for some kind of corporate work that you'll fit into a structure. And that's when you go out and you serve the greater, process. But it's not really the best way to learn. And there are many ways for each different group of people and individuals, because they have the unique personalities. They respond to not only from the different cultures, but their life and their home life and their genetics. And I mean, that's what the book talks about. What's the best is a good environment, good family life. Well, it sounds wonderful, but it's not necessarily, this is, the majority of people. There's many broken homes and parents are working. So you see where I'm going?
Absolutely, and thank you for sharing, because I believe you bring into focus something that is highly relevant, true, and that is true, I would say, in America as it is around the world. It's just a matter of scales. I always say most problems are present in all societies, just to different degrees. I can share with you, just to do your point, that immigrant women in America from Mexico, Central America, and South America are trained by some organizations that I know on how to shop food with scarce resources, and are taught English language by providing them with a meritocratic process where there are incentives for them to learn to shop the most healthy food with the smallest amount of money. Those who succeed at doing best in one outing come back and are rewarded with additional cash to continue to buy food for their families. And it's a way to incentivize education for immigrants. Right? Is right or wrong, I don't know, but it's sponsored by organizations, and it is a way to teach. There is poverty, there is unfortunately different societal problems, health-related problems, access to education problems all over the world. And I think you are right on point. Right on point, I agree with you. We will move out of this more arid data-driven section of the presentation soon, but I just wanted to share with you some of what comes to mind when we're talking about the revelation, not only from the perspective of one country or another, or one region or another, but the plurality of what I call the human perspective, right? All of us, because these rankings are just numeric points that show where we are, but why we are there is what matters. What can we do with this information is what really matters. How can we employ it? How can we internalize it and make it become part of our mental processes, our reflections and meditations, and even our worship, as you well pointed out, right? So this slide here is just showing tertiary education through year 2050. And it's a projection. You can see what the projections are showing and what the rankings are going to be. Interesting in themselves. It seems things won't change much, but the trajectory is ascendant, and that is the good news for both developing and developed countries. Now, talking about literacy, this graph here is showing from the 1800s through 2016 where the illiterate population of the world lies. And we can see how good things look, right? So it seems the literate world population is growing dramatically. By 2016, 86.02% of the world population, according to the World Bank, the UNESCO, and the OECD. So that's like, oh, wow, that's really good. But what does that mean? What else is behind this data? Well, this is a projected world population by level of education. I will go back to literacy in a second. Just take a look at this. Right now, this red arrow here is pointing to a measuring point on 2015, where we see the post-secondary, in other words, higher education, is at 700 million people, roughly. That's where we are. Where we expect to be by year 2100 is at 3 billion. So more than fourfold growth in the next 70-something years. That is a remarkable growth projection. That is where we expect to be if trends continue to be where they are. And that is where more and more individuals will be in terms of their ability and access to everything we've been discussing, including food and education. So the prospects are positive, but to the point that was made earlier, schooling does not always lead to learning. Worldwide, there are more no learners in school than out of school. This is coming from the UNESCO's website. So what does that mean? When I read it, I was like, wow, what does that mean? Well, some of the aspects we just touched upon. On any given school day, over 1 billion children around the world head to class. That is more than ever before. Yet, many of them do not learn much, or just simply do not learn. A lack of trained teachers, inadequate learning materials, makeshift classes, poor sanitation make it difficult, not to mention hunger, illness, exhaustion from work or household tasks. This is the reality of the world. So numbers can be deceiving, right? We see an increase in literacy, but what is the quality of education we are providing? An estimated 617 million children and adolescents around the world are unable to reach minimum proficiency levels in reading and mathematics. And I can testify as a matter of just personal experience, right? In different realms, in the different countries where I have lived in 3 continents. It's true in every single continent that I have lived. This is true everywhere where I have been able to go. And this is part of our problems. So, tough reality. A lot of data. We have not too much to go. I would like to share some about what I'm calling cosmic perspective with a question mark. Before I do so, any questions, comments? More comments than questions, please, because I don't think I have answers, but any suggestions? Gail, raise your hand. David.
Thank you. I was reading about when we're settled in life the other day, and what it looks like on a normal planet, of which we are not. And that is the balance of education between truth, beauty, and goodness, and truth being the area of the sciences more, and beauty being the area of the arts more, and goodness being the areas of the religions and philosophies more. And it apparently looks like we have a very long way to go. So anyhow, that was just my insight. Thank you for a great presentation, by the way.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Was there someone else?
David, Henry.
Oh, I can unmute myself now. Okay. Yeah. You know, when you look at where we are today in this world, education-wise, banking-wise, corporate-wise, I think we can better understand what the Urantia book means, that when it says that the new and oncoming social order is not going to settle down for a millennium. We have to prepare ourselves for changes in economics and politics. I think that illuminates that when the revelation was given to us, they told us to exercise our souls in patience. I think it brings maybe new meaning to what it means about when the Urantia book is really going to have its worldwide mission. I think we're going to have to be a lot more patient than we think we're going to have to be.
Yeah. Very good
But
point.
I do have all the confidence that the Urantia book is going to have a worldwide mission, and the world is going to be a much better place, but it's going to take a long time. Thanks.
No, thank you.
We have Marta. You can unmute yourself if you want, Marta.
Thank you. I think one piece that seems to be clear, especially from the statistics, is that if education isn't meaningful, if students can't have it be meaningful in their lives, they really don't learn. They may take in facts, et cetera, but there isn't the learning that we need. And I think one of the things we're seeing with this COVID-19 around the globe is that in places where our education has not prepared our adults or kids to be flexible, to be adaptable, to see things in a different way, that we're seeing a collapse of society because they can't manage through the present crises. And I think with your initial four points of the purpose of education, that education is going to lose its usefulness if we don't go back to those 4 points, because we cannot move forward unless we have personality develop, character development, tools to deal with reality that aren't about memorizing. And I just talk from my own experience, what I've seen with my own kids and grandkids, that our education in this country, while they are maybe more literate, it has started to focus on where you're going to go to college, where you're going to go to graduate school, where you're going to get your PhD. And those have been the goals, not who are you going to be in your life. And so I was also taken with the statistics you just showed about, even though more literate, they're not learning. And I think that's a big warning to us, quite honestly.
Yeah, I agree. And also from a perspective of the Urantia book, right? So it's really cosmic. And I was just thinking of cosmic perspective, because I put those big words at the beginning, right? Is the Urantia book cosmic perspective? And then I came across this cartoon. That just kind of, I put the words there. Of course, this is from one of the most famous artists in Latin America in the last 50, 60 years. It's not only about formal education. It's not only about, as we know, as it was discussed earlier today, reading the book, studying the book, right? And going back to the beginning of the presentation and in trying to kind of bring it together, it's about the business of living, what the book itself calls true education. We are told education is the business of living. It must continue throughout a lifetime so that mankind may gradually experience the ascending levels of mortal wisdom. And then they tell us which those are, right? Knowledge of things, realization of meanings, appreciation of values, the nobility of work, which is duty, right? Morality, which we discussed earlier, together with character, and spiritual discernment. And when by means of all these achievements, we attain God consciousness. The business of living is education, or rather education is the business of living. True education is experience and character. I'm sorry, I think there is...
Yeah, there are still 2 questions or 2 people.
Yes, please go ahead.
Jim, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, this is Jim. I found it interesting that most Urantia readers had not completed the book. I remember Adler saying that the rule of 80-20 does apply to almost all societies in terms of things. He once wrote a poem and he gave it to 100 people of all literate people and said, the next time we get together, I'd like to have you comment on this. And once again, no matter which 100 people he gave it to, there was never more than 20% of the people who read it. We're talking about a one-page poem. To get people to do anything is still going to be this. In 12-step programs, there's still only 20% of the people who are sober that are still that will ever work the steps, ever complete them. So what can we aspire to? We can aspire to get the 20% of the people educated and do the best, and maybe expand beyond that. But getting the realistic part of educating the people who want to be educated the true under. But the true education in your Urantia book starts at home. And I would factor in the saying that in the United States, of the foster children, there's less than 0.1% of all foster children have ever completed college. So they had no family. So therefore, what kind of chance do they have in life? So those things I'd just like to throw out there, and thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, so we have Dana, and then it's almost time. But you can end, of course, your presentation, Victor.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to mention I have this within reach here at my desk, a book by a reader, John Krieger. Some of you know John, who is a high school teacher and developed something that he calls the Creed Project, where he takes high schoolers through this semester-long process of developing a personal creed. And it's such a lovely program. Any educators online should have a look at this if you're in that sort of middle school, high school, and I'll put a reference in the notes. But you know, Marta said the question, I wrote it down. Who are you going to be in your life? You know, and so the challenge, I think, for us as you know, fifth epical revelation supporters who want to influence education is influencing it in that direction of character development, of addressing the question, who do you want to be in your life? I mean, reading, writing, and arithmetic are important, but they're not character development, and they don't solve or even address, you know, the problem of the cosmic nature of human life. But the great presentation. I wish, you know, we could spend, you know, all of 24 hours, you know, drilling into the various aspects of this particular problem. I'm glad you're focusing on it, Victor. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Again, just an approximation. You know, we are at the 50 minutes mark. So in interest of time, I'm just going to share with you two or three more slides. This one is about what the book tells us on part 4 regarding Jesus's life and his education, theological, which he got from the Chazan, right? But his real education, we are told, he obtained by mingling with his fellow men. That is real education according to the book, right? By staying in close association with the human race, to get to know them. And of course, to love them by being able to understanding them, understanding us. True education has to do with this aspect of experiencing the business of life. That is what is education. The mortal career, the soul evolution, is not so much a probation as it is an education. The entire sentient plant of mortal progression is characterized by the practice of giving out to other beings new truth and experience just as soon as it is acquired. That is that is one of the things I would love to leave with you. It's about sharing, because ultimately, and I will jump to this slide here that I used to open the conversation, the master, the revelation, experience, and loving service. That is what amounts to learning and educating. Learn to be of loving service is what it's all about. And with that, I will stop, and we'll be happy if we have a minute or two to listen to more valuable contributions or questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.